Moving on to Kosovo now. The situation in the north of Kosovo and with neighbouring Serbia has continued to simmer this week as three Kosovo policemen that Pristina says were kidnapped by Serbian authorities from within its territory remain in custody. While slow to react at first, the EU and the US have called on Serbia to release the captives without conditions, while reiterating calls for both sides to come back to Brussels for dialogue. Meanwhile, the West remains firm in its demands that Kosovo withdraw Albanian mayors from the north, withdraw special police units, and implement the controversial Association of Serb Municipalities, something agreed on in 2013, but ruled unconstitutional in 2015. A late-night meeting in Brussels between the EU and each country's respective leader yielded little in the way of results. Since 26th of May, when tensions reached heights not seen since the end of the Kosovo-Serbia war in 1999, it seems to many that the stance towards Kosovo has been harsher than usual and much harsher than the one taken with Belgrade. Today, I'm speaking with two Western voices who've spoken out in strong support of Kosovo during these challenging times. Joining me on the phone is Conservative MP and Chair of the UK's Foreign Affairs Committee, Alicia Kearns. Alicia, now, in a tweet last week, you called out the use of words detained and arrestation by the EU's chief diplomat, Joseph Borrell. This week, you've also questioned the wording of a statement from the EU delegation in Kosovo regarding a license for the TV station Clan Kosovo. And I saw you also noted the praise for the Serbian-led Platinum Wolf military exercise. Meanwhile, Kosovo was kicked out of Defender 2023. Can you elaborate for us, what is it about the language coming out of EU institutions right now which is bothering you?
No, absolutely. I think my concern comes down to balance and proportionality of the way in which particularly the US and the EU are responding to heightened tensions in Kosovo. The reality is that if we go back to what has underpinned this crisis, it is the decision by Serbia to commit foreign interference in domestic elections within Kosovo. That is what has essentially caused and underlined the conflict we're seeing currently in the rising tensions. My concern is that we all want to see de-escalation, but instead what we have seen is our democratic partner denigrated and punished, whilst an increasingly autocratic country has been embraced and there has been no meaningful repercussion, despite that they have arbitrarily detained or kidnapped three Kosovar police officers. The unwillingness of countries, organisations like the EU, to call it arbitrary or illegal detention, to recognise that kidnapping has taken place, or for any punishment to be put in place, is unforgivable. And the fact that essentially the US has gone ahead with this exercise again shows disproportionate, because if we're saying that mayors trying to take up their legal right to an office deserves for Kosovo to be kicked out of a military exercise, then surely the kidnapping, the illegal detention of three Kosovar police officers should also result in Serbia not being allowed to participate in a military exercise.
I mean, yes, what you say is completely logical. So you think that the EU is taking an unbalanced approach, EU and the US, towards Kosovo and Serbia. But I guess my question is, why? Why are they being like this?
Ultimately, this is a failure of deterrence diplomacy. And what have we seen over the last 2 decades? A consistent failure to stand up to those who embrace autocracy and who do not necessarily engage meaningfully in international processes. So, for example, Kosovo here is our democratic partner. Kosovo is the one that is agreeing to participate in sanctions and to fully support the international community and the EU community when it comes to Ukraine. Whereas in contrast, you have Vučić saying that his hand is broken and will be for 4 years, so that he cannot sign an agreement explicitly to help de-escalate the situation. You have Vučić signing a foreign policy agreement with Russia many months after the renewed illegal invasion of Ukraine. All I am calling for here is not punishment for Serbia. In fact, one of the things I think we should be talking about more here is how do we support Serb Kosovo communities. Very few people are asking about what they want. Very few people are hearing their voices. But actually, I'm asking for balance. It is wrong to denigrate and punish a democratic partner, and for there to be no repercussions for very serious actions from a partner that cannot be relied on.
And actually, I interviewed some people from the Kosovo Serb community a couple of weeks ago, and they want the association established, they want their rights enshrined further, etc. But more than anything, they just want life to return back to normal in many ways. Now, another question is, currently there are 5 EU member states who don't recognise Kosovo. Then we have Borrell, who's from Spain, who's obviously a key figure in the dialogue process. Spain doesn't recognise Kosovo. We have Lajčák in charge of the dialogue process from Slovakia, which doesn't recognise Kosovo. And we have Oliver Varhelyi in charge of enlargement, who's from Hungary, who does recognise Kosovo, but has very close ties with Serbia and Russia. Can the EU seriously lead the dialogue process when we consider these points?
So I think there is a fundamental challenge around the fact that the EU does not have unity on this issue. I think EU member states would appreciate and recognise the fact that there is no unity amongst the EU around this. However, when it comes to individuals, I do believe that these are professional and highly experienced diplomats. So I genuinely believe, and I have to believe, that they would act in the best interests of stability in Europe and not in line with those actions of their own countries. But of course, I'm disappointed that when they were leading figures within their own systems, they chose not to help ensure that Kosovo was recognised. But I've met with Lajčák. He's been very positive. It's been very helpful to have those meetings and discussions with him. For me, this is about the EU being divided as an institution. This is not about the individuals themselves, who I have not seen any reason to essentially bring their individual actions into question.
It's good to hear. It's something I've been thinking about all morning. Can they draw the line professionally? I hope they can. It's something. But I think there's an issue as well that this could lead to mistrust amongst Kosovars as well, who are thinking, their countries don't recognise us. Can we trust them to lead this? That was something that came across my mind over coffee this morning.
Sure. I think the EU is completely sincere in wanting stability. They want to de-escalate the situation, and that is what those individuals are working to do. And of course, we don't know what necessarily the personal views of those individuals are. Just because their countries chose not to recognise Kosovo doesn't mean that they were not personally of that view. So I think it's very important that we trust that the EU is trying to act from a neutral position, who genuinely wants to end the escalations. But I would just challenge them on the fact that you cannot have the EU many days on not commenting on the the illegal detention of Kosovar police. And then when you do see it, what we did see around the arrests of the Kosovan police, the illegal arrests, was we did actually see, both sides being called on to de-escalate. The problem was, but when we had the mayoral issue, which was ill-considered, and the reality is that many KFOR soldiers were seriously hurt, so this was not a good thing. And I'm not an apologist for the fact that those those activities took place. But we have to make sure that there is balance throughout. And the other big concern I have is that when we talk about what happens in the north of Kosovo, there is a lack of conversation. I have not seen one international leader recognise or talk about the fact that there are armed militia, funded and armed, operating in North Kosovo, who are moving arms across the border on a daily basis within Kosovo. And the reality is that if individuals in northern Kosovo choose not to support these armed militias, there is evidence of them finding grenades on their doorsteps, in essentially blackmailing and intimidating them into helping them. There is evidence of efforts to intimidate and antagonize KFOR soldiers to escalate the situation. Why is there no international conversation taking place about dealing with these armed militias, which are Belgrade-backed and funded?
It's a very good question, and I thank you for raising these questions publicly and for having this discussion with me. Alicia, thank you very much for your time, and please keep up your strong views on this.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Thank you.